Council meeting to order. Would you all please rise for the invocation?
We meet to serve our community and endeavor to be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Let us be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chamber minds that think and hearts that feel, so that in our deliberations we may display imagination, wisdom, and courage, and the will to do our work for the good of all.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and the roll call, please.
All members of council are present, your worship, with the exceptions of councillors Lubberts and Noyes, and I also note that regional councillor Encina has sent his regrets.
Right. I note that there is one addendum this evening. We received a response to an inquiry made by Councillor Lubberts at the November 18th, 2019 regular council meeting. The attachment wasn't included in the original agenda that was circulated. It's now been included, and that relates to municipal natural assets initiatives. I've got three announcements. The first relates to the lengthy regional council meeting last Thursday, which dealt with the report of the ombudsman into the hiring of the former chief administrative officer. There was about 2.5 hours worth of closed session meetings where regional councillors received advice on both civil and criminal aspects of the ombudsman's report. And then we convened into open session, and after we had given legal counsel direction with respect to outstanding civil legal actions, and passed a resolution to refer the ombudsman's report to the Niagara Regional Police, which is the police authority for Niagara, and then they will process that. Presumably they'll hand it off to the Ontario Provincial Police to pursue further investigations. The investigations, as designated in the motion, are not necessarily to be confined to the strict process of hiring the CAO. If the police find something further, which police are periodically want to do, they will presumably investigate further. The second thing I wanted to point out is that we have a Crime Stoppers flag raising here on January the 6th at 9 a.m. That's January 6, 2020. And then finally, I just want to do a bit of a review with respect to 2019, because this is the last regularly scheduled meeting for 2019 for this council, and this is the effective end of the first year of this term of council. Accordingly, while it's a little early, on behalf of all members of council, I want to wish all residents of Fort Erie a Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy, and prosperous New Year. I'd also like to reflect on what this council has accomplished over the past year. From a financial prudence perspective, we were able to limit the 2019 tax and wastewater rate increases to 1.37 and 3.98% respectively, despite having to roll into those numbers much larger increases by the region of Niagara for both, which does have a significant impact on our total rates. So as an example, about 42 or 3% of our tax levy goes to the region. About 59% of our water and wastewater bills are monies that we have to pay directly to the region. For 2020, Fort Erie will again experience low increases in both the levy and wastewater rates, even when combined with the significantly higher projected increases by the Niagara region for their tax levy, which is currently standing at 5.8% increase, and wastewater rates, which are at 5.15%, projected to be at that rate for the next 9 years. On the infrastructure side, council has continued to invest heavily in restoring our road network. Once again, we spent in excess of $1.5 million in road resurfacing and continued a program of road reconstruction to ensure that our roads effectively serve residents, businesses, and visitors. That trend will continue into 2020 as Fort Erie expends significant sums to maintain all of the infrastructure, and that includes roads, bridges, water and sewer lines, storm systems, buildings, equipment, parks and recreational facilities for which the town is responsible. Most notably, Fort Erie is the only municipality in Niagara, and undoubtedly one of the few in Ontario, that will have accomplished or established the financing plan to cover our long-term infrastructure costs through a comprehensive asset management plan that identifies all infrastructure, its condition, and the funding necessary to ensure the viability of that infrastructure. In 2019, new parks were completed at Bay Beach and Crystal Ridge. New parks are scheduled in 2020 for Albert Street and Douglas Park on Bertie Street across from the hospital. The town will continue the multi-year plan of revitalization and upgrading neighborhood parks and increasing the level of service for maintaining those parks and stormwater management ponds, which can act as passive parks in many instances. The council has had several very contentious issues to deal with in 2019. Think beach operations and parking at Bay Beach, short-term rentals, and cargo or shipping containers, to name but three. For each matter, council held public meetings and listened to residents on all sides of the issues in determining policies which are subject to periodic review as means of ensuring that we take into account the impact of policies adopted and the changing dynamics. The town has continued the unprecedented residential housing boom, which began about 4 years ago and shows no sign of abating. Our new Affordable Housing Committee and Council have collaborated on establishing a housing strategy that should assist the town to diversify our housing mix and to create the environment for more affordable equity and rental units to be constructed. Perhaps the most challenging issue for 2019 has been the future of the E.J. Freeland Community Center, following the announcement in March by the YMCA Niagara that it was closing the facility. Over a series of meetings with the task force that the town established to save programming at the facility, the Niagara Y, the Boys and Girls Club, and many residents and organizations, it appears that the town is on the verge of finding a solution to ensure a continuation of programming and services, if not the expansion of those services and programs at the facility. Mother Nature has visited Fort Erie with a vengeance on 2 occasions recently, leaving a trail of devastation along the Lake Erie shoreline in particular, but throughout the town. Town staff anticipates that it will cost several $1 million to rebuild certain damaged facilities such as the walkway at Erie Beach or Waverly Beach. Representatives from the provincial government were in Fort Erie in early November to view the damage, both to public property and private property, and will make a determination within the coming weeks as to whether the town and private owners will qualify for provincial disaster assistance. It is notable that town, Canadian Niagara Power, and Niagara Parks Commission forces, supplemented by the Fort Erie Fire Department, worked effectively to minimize the impacts of those storms on local residents. On the governance side, Fort Erie put forth a strong position for the continuation of the current 2-tier system in Niagara, provided there is movement taken to realign some services and to share others where it makes financial sense. As part of that exercise, a critical analysis was made as to the viability of Fort Erie as a single-tier municipality responsible directly for all services and programs to our residents. While not the preferred model going forward, it was an option presented to provincial ministers and representatives by Fort Erie as the governance review unfolded. One other significant change in 2019 was the decision to alter the method of delivery of economic development services, which will be provided now directly from Town Hall commencing January 1st, 2020. However, senior staff at the EDTC will be hired by the town and have already began to coalesce with town staff. Finally, significant work has been done during the current year by all municipal committees. By way of just one other example, the Community Health Service Committee has worked diligently to attract new physicians and primary care services to the town. Over the course of 2019, the number of residents without a family physician in our town was reduced from about 35% to under 10%. This figure will be further reduced once 2 new physicians commence practice in Fort Erie in 2020. These are highlights. There have been many other actions and initiatives taken by the town over 2019. While this is a tribute to the responsiveness and diligence of members of council, it is also a tribute to the hard work, dedication, and commitment of the staff employed by the town of Fort Erie, who have now accumulated over 3 years without any lost time as a result of workplace injury, something unheard of in a place of employment in Canada, and something for which we should all be very proud. From the CAO, Tom Cookett, to his senior director and management team, to all of the employees who have made our community a better place for all over 2019, I express deep gratitude. I expect, and we can all expect, a continuation of good things for Fort Erie in 2020. So, Merry Christmas, everyone. That takes us to declarations of pecuniary interest. If there are none, oh, sorry, George. Councillor McDermott.
Yes, Your Worship, I do have one in the community gaming minutes with regards to an allocation to the YMCA, as my son is employed by the...
Okay, so we'll remove those from the consent agenda when we deal with it, and we'll deal with that separately. Are there any other declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none. There are some upcoming budget meetings for 2020. The next Council and Budget Committee meeting relative to the general levy operating budget and assessment analysis and the library board budget will be held January the 22nd, 2020, which is a Wednesday. The next meeting on January the 29th, 2020, if required, will deal with anything left over in terms of budget committee meetings. All budget meetings begin at 6 p.m. at the Town Hall Council Chambers. The budget bylaws are scheduled for Monday, January 2020, January 20th, 2020, which is the water and wastewater budget and rates bylaw. Monday, February 10th, which will be the general levy budget and general capital budget. And Monday, March 16th, 2020, if necessary. You'll note that this evening we are dealing with a preliminary capital budget bylaw, and that will come up near the end of this meeting. In the absence of the regional councillor, there will be no report this evening, so that will take us directly to presentations and delegations, and I invite Winnie Swam and Sandra Fishman to come forward. They are the co-chairs of the Communities in Bloom Committee. Good evening.
Mayor Redekop, members of council and staff. My name is Winnie Swallam. Sandra Fishman and I serve as co-chairs of Fort Erie Communities in Bloom. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. We want to present the following, some background experience regarding our involvement with Communities in Bloom. Let me do that here at the onset. Communities in Bloom, Fort Erie, started in 2003 and 4 with a lot of enthusiasm and success. Since then, Fort Erie, municipally, business, institutional, and residential, Fort Erie has experienced a lot of success and wins at the provincial, national, and international level. We believe our community has made great gains. Entering at the higher levels involves inviting qualified judges to evaluate our efforts in fulfilling the criteria and values of the Communities in Bloom program. 2015 was our most recent major involvement, winning at the silver level at the international level. At this time, we believe we still have so much to gain. With renewed ambition, we present tonight our current requests. Number 1, a request to approve and revise our mandate for Fort Erie Communities in Bloom. And number 2, to request a small increase for our 2020 budget. And number 3, to request some extra clerical graphic help for 2020 to provide skills that we as a committee do not have in order to carry out our tasks. And finally, to approval for the Fort Erie Communities in Bloom to enter the international level competition in 2020. I'll speak to the first items and then Sandra will continue. First of all, our mandate. As we examined our current mandate, we realize that it's quite narrow in scope, dealing mainly with a community property garden competition and an awards night. At this point, we believe we have been and are growing far beyond that in our growing experience with the creation and promotion of healthy green spaces and all its associated criteria as valued by the Communities in Bloom program. So tonight we propose of the following revision as a mandate for Fort Erie Communities in Bloom beginning in 2020. And you'll notice how it broadens our concept of the whole program. To instill Fort Erie Communities in Bloom values across Fort Erie through education and promotion as set down by the organization Communities in Bloom Canada. Such values include exemplary practices in the following criteria, including landscaping, forestry, floral displays, turf and ground cover, heritage, and environmental awareness, with community involvement being an integral part and a binding component in all efforts to create a healthy green community here in Fort Erie. Such criteria will be promoted across Fort Erie to residential, business, institutional, and municipal property through such events as awards and recognition opportunities as we've had in the past, but to include garden tours, special workshops to motivate and educate, and other ongoing programs that pertain to these goals. Number 2, we request a small increase in budget, an increase from $13,000 to $15,000 to cover increased costs of necessary items, promotional and advertising especially, that are essential to our program, as well as membership and participation in the Communities in Bloom. As in the past, the supplemental budget will hopefully request a figure for the additional staff support. The creation of effective brochures and other information pieces require special skills, personnel with graphic art, editing, and computer skills that we as a committee cannot do as effectively as a trained person could do. This will greatly assist and enhance our communication with the public and especially our targeted audience. We do ask that at the appropriate time that you approve the supplemental budget, you will consider this part. We are happy to further work with staff on this. At this point, we do not see it as any more than last year. Sandra will continue.
Good evening. We are also here this evening hoping to gain your support to enter the town of Fort Erie in the international competition in 2020. I would like to take this time to briefly explain how the competition works. We will prepare to host 2 international judges for 2 days. This usually happens in July. They will be visiting municipal, residential, corporate, and institutional sector. We will be evaluated on the following criteria as Winnie named: tidiness, environmental action, heritage conservation, landscaped areas, floral displays, with an emphasis on community involvement in all of those criteria. While the judges are here, the Community in Bloom's committee must host an event for the judges to attend. On our last morning, we will meet with the judges for a debriefing meeting where the judges will discuss with us all the areas that we excelled in and the areas that need our attention. We do not get our score here. That happens at the International Symposium at the end of September. The symposium is a 5-day event, which includes various seminars, opportunity for networking, and exchanging new ideas with other municipalities. Our evaluation form will be given to us on the last day at the awards gala. We then return to Fort Erie and work on any recommendations the judges have given us. We are expected to return to the competition within 3 years. However, in 2018 and 2019, we got special permission to stay in the Friends category, seeing we had a new committee and a new councillor appointed. We explained that we needed more time to educate everyone on this program and how it worked. Usually when we haven't competed in 5 years, they make you start back at the beginning at a provincial level. This is another reason why we strongly are requesting to participate this year. We don't want to start back down to zero. This past October, some of our members attended a Community in Bloom's workshop held by the Community in Bloom's National Director, hosted in the town of Lincoln. There were other communities from the Niagara region there. We met with a councillor from Port Colborne, who was there to get all the info she could on how to go about joining this great organization. She truly was amazed in how great the town of Fort Erie was looking and wants to follow in our footsteps. There was also some town staff from Thorold. One of them lives in Fort Erie, and he was on board trying to get the town of Thorold to follow in our footsteps also. We seem to become the leader in the Niagara region in Community in Blooms. There was, we were very humbled and offered to help them in any way we could. We also had the opportunity to sit down with Martin Quinn, the National Director of Communities in Blooms, where we discussed some new ideas and asked for some direction for our committee. After briefly going through our profile book and our evaluation form from 2015, he highly recommended that we participate in 2020. He reassured us that we were already 90% there. All we have to do is show our improvements. We do not have to start from scratch. We do realize the amount of clerical work is our greatest challenge. So we would like to recommend hiring a part-time contract employee that could help us with our schedules, our profile book, some graphic design, and such stuff as that. This would definitely fall under a supplement budget. This program is about growing and greening our space, fostering in civic pride. Within the context of climate change and environmental concerns, communities that are involved in this program can be proud of their efforts, which provide a real, meaningful environmental solutions that benefit all of society. Thank you for your consideration, and if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fishman and Ms. Swan. I don't think it can be overstated the impact that Communities in Bloom has had on our community over the years. And Winnie, you've been involved, if not from day one.
Since day one.
From day one, right. So that you would have seen the impact of what you've been working on. And the committee has certainly helped to raise the international profile of Fort Erie, small Fort Erie. Any event, any members of council have any questions of the delegates? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I only have a couple of questions. The first one is, you were speaking about Bloom values and criteria. What do you mean by that?
The criteria is the basis used by the judges to evaluate. It includes a number of things, including landscaping. I can mention a little bit about some of them to give you a better understanding. It's important that we all work in this together, the municipality, the residents, the businesses. The involvement of the community council, the municipality, is very important because about 53% of the judging marks are based on what the municipality does. That's why we're here coaxing tonight for your involvement. But back to the criteria. The landscaping is simply the general design of property and the appropriateness of plantings and all of that kind of thing. The placement of trees, shrubs, gardens, and then, of course, the health and the care of those things. They really look at that. How healthy are they? You know, the trees aren't leaning and that kind of thing. The turf and the ground cover is how we care for our, not just our lawns, but grasses, any ground cover plants. In fact, encouraging other plants in addition to grasses, the regular lawn. Our biggest challenge on the turf and ground cover is the fact that many people still enjoy shaving their lawns down to that fine groomed look, and Communities in Bloom frowns on that. They want the grass to be about 2.5 inches high, 2 to 2.5 inches high, and that's for good moisture retention and root development. So we have to keep reminding people and trying to motivate them to do that. And then we've done well in floral displays. Each of the villages in Fort Erie, each of the commercial areas have really done their streets quite nicely. One of the things that they are asking us now is to give some attention to the planting of wildflowers. That's a little harder for tailored gardeners to want to do, but there is a value in that for pollination purposes. So, and we do have a good example in that in the Conservation Club in Stevensville. They've just planted, I think, over 200 plants out there, and that's really a thrill. Environmental awareness is another one of the criteria, and it's very, very important. It's probably the peak of all today in our environment with climate change and all of that. Now, we did score quite highly in that in 2015. We got 88.3%, which is a pretty good mark. Tidiness is one area. That's another criteria. It's one of the areas that we noticed, just observed that Fort Erie has improved. I remember when we moved to Crystal Beach in 1996 from Collingwood, I was appalled at the condition of streets and all of this. And about every other day, I'd be out there picking up litter and a whole bunch of people would join and away we would go. But it's amazing, and it's hard to believe that we hardly have to do that anymore. And that's across Fort Erie. And we can really commend Fort Erie for that. I remember one of the early sermons that we got in Crystal Beach on that came from Lorraine Murphy. Some of you will remember dear Lorraine. She used to say, look, clean up your places, because if you invite company, you'd better have your house cleaned. And that made a lot of sense. And she was really applying it to a property. If you want people to come to Fort Erie, then make Fort Erie look good. We do have some new material coming out on this year just to keep that good reputation. Forestry is a big challenge. But we have made progress. It's probably one of our greatest, the judges have asked us in 2015 to get a tree inventory going and to keep it going, and then to deal with the proper planting of trees and then the proper mulching. These are real challenges across Fort Erie. Now, just to encourage us, even though we aren't doing everything perfectly yet, in 2012, in our judging, we got 70% in that. In 2009, we got 70%. 2012, from the judges, we got 80%, but then we got 90% the last time. But we still have very bad mulching practices. So we've been doing workshops this summer and being at street festivals and that kind of thing, trying to encourage people to mulch the proper way. But it's discouraging because we drive and look at new developments, and we've got to get our landscapists doing the right things. And then community involvement. That ties it all together. And one of the best examples that I can tell you about that hopefully will happen this year with community involvement. We know that Fort Erie is made up of a lot of different communities, and then from time to time we go off in our isolated area and do our little thing. But it's really important that we work together. So this year, for 2020, we are tentatively planning, and we've met with a lot of the groups, to have, instead of our competition and awards night, to have a garden tour explosion in Fort Erie, where we would have 25 to 30 gardens all in the same week, and people would just blow their minds going to these gardens. I think that gardeners will love it because they will get 200 or 300 people looking at their garden rather than just 2 judges. And so we're excited. We're working with, of course, the Crystal Beach Beautification Committee, and they're on board with us. They're going to partner with us in that. The Ridgeway District Garden Club is close to a yes. We have one more meeting to meet with them, and then we hope to get a final answer. We've talked to the Canettes in Stevensville. They're very involved. They're very favorable for it. We have yet to talk to the Fort Erie Hort Club, but we don't see that as an issue because we have 2 of their members on our committees, on the community center committee. So we hope that will put on some pressure. But that's what we mean by community involvement, which has to tie all of it together, and the judges look for that. One judge called Fort Erie a community of communities, which was a nice way of saying, look, work together and become one. So that's what that means, if that helps you.
Could I just explain to you what the blooms are? So we were judged and we got a 5 bloom, okay? It starts with 1 bloom. So if you score up to 55%, you get 1 bloom. 56 to 63% is a 2 bloom. 64 to 72% is a 3 bloom. And 73 to 81% is a 4 bloom. Anything above 82% is a 5 bloom. We scored 87.65 in our last time that we competed internationally in 2015. So it was a very high score. We do score very high. We excel in heritage conservation. It's one of our greatest criterias that we get to show in Fort Erie. It's an easy one for us, that one, right? Because of the museum. They get to meet with Jane Davies, and they'd like to spend the whole 2 days with Jane Davies, right? She's so great at, showing off our town and where we've been, where we come from, right? So, yeah, the blooms is big for us. We are very competitive, Winnie and I. We like to win. We like to score high scores, and we are very passionate about this program.
We're maybe perhaps more conscientious than we were in high school.
Just one last question. What do you see then as the greatest value to this program for Fort Erie?
There's a couple of them. One of the things that is important to everyone is improving their property and the property values. And with a lot of people buying in the area, properties look good, the grooming and all of that. And the other one is we see it as a great opportunity for Fort Erie to be evaluated at not too much cost. They come in and they give us a real great feedback in many of the areas, in all of the areas. And it helps us to know what our next steps are in making Fort Erie even better. And that's what we want to keep doing. So it's an evaluation process that's important to us. And also, then we know as we're evaluated, our expectation from the judges is that we deal with those things that they suggest. They're waiting to see if we are dealing with the things that they suggested in 215. That will be our biggest challenge, is to see that we've combed through all their comments and that we've motivated somebody somewhere, or all of us, to improve on those things.
Thank you.
Any other councillors? I'm going to mark you down both as extremely enthusiastic about Communities in Bloom.
Thank you.
It's our baby.
I can feel the energy up here.
Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Very much, and good
Thank
luck.
you.
That then takes us to the consent agenda, and we have one item, item 9.2.3E, which will have to be dealt with separately. So Councillor Butler, is there anyone else that wishes anything else taken out of the consent agenda? If not, Councillor Butler, could you move the consent agenda less item 9.2.3E? It's resolution number 1.
Thanks, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that Council approves the consent agenda items as recommended.
Except item
For item 92, 9.2.3
9.2.3E.
E. Thank you.
Okay, that resolution's on the floor for questions or comments. I had one question with respect to or not one question, some questions, Mr. Cookett, with respect to community gaming. And I noticed that in the minutes, seemed to me that periodically in the past, we used to get a list of organizations and what their allocations were. Is that something that's available to members of council, to your knowledge?
Yes, it is. You're referring to their annual contributions?
Allocations.
Allocations, yes. That comes forward before council, and I think we had one come forward not too long ago, actually. But I can see that council receives that.
Okay, the other thing that I was wondering about, because I noticed that there were some compliance, in the minutes there's usually some reference to some compliance issues, what have you. I don't ever recall seeing any specific information on that. Is that information that's available to councillors? In other words, which organizations are having difficulties complying? Is that something that councillors can be privy to?
From what I recall in the past, where there's non-compliance, it shows up in the minutes if a board member has a conflict, it'll say, has a conflict with this organization who happens to be in non-compliance. If you look through the minutes, it does make mention of the board reviewing those organizations that are in non-compliance, but that list is not provided. And I don't know if it ever has been in the past, but this is something I'll have to look into. And maybe Councillor Dubanow would know further because he sits on the board, but I'm not sure why we wouldn't be able to provide that, but I'll leave that with Councillor Dubanow if that's been discussed in any of their board meetings.
Okay, and not so much, I mean, I presume that if there are some letters or steps taken with respect to non-compliance, that typically organizations get into compliance. So perhaps Councillor Dubanow could check to see what information in that regard could be released. Oh, sure, please do.
Yeah, certainly, with regard to that information, it is part of the minutes within the gaming corporation itself. Some of that information is not released publicly, if only just to, certainly you don't want the entire community knowing if an organization is struggling or if they're having difficulty attracting members, getting them out for bingos. So it's kind of, it's not that we're trying to be secretive and hide that information, and certainly if a member of council requested that, it would be available. It's just to give those organizations the benefit of the doubt so that, people aren't looking at this and saying what's going on. It gives them a chance to come into compliance. So that's why they aren't there. And certainly if there's information that any member of this council wanted, we do have the staff here at Town Hall, and I would certainly be happy to bring anything up to the board if information was needed.
No, and that policy makes sense. And I appreciate your explanation, Councillor Dubanow. Are there any other questions or comments with respect to the items in the consent agenda? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. So Councillor Butler, I wonder if we could, you may need a different seconder. I wonder if we could move item 9.2.3E.
Councillor Zanko.
Yep, fine.
So, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Zanko, that council approves the consent agenda item 9.2.3E as recommended.
Any questions or comments with respect to that item? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That takes us into new business, and Councillor Zanko, you have the first resolution under that heading.
Yes, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubanow, that council accepts the resignation of Cole McGoggin from the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee, and further, that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. I noticed that I glossed over a response to an inquiry. I don't know whether Mr. Brady would like to comment on that. I'm not expecting you to read the attachment, but maybe some reference to the fact that there is information that's been provided to members of council.
Not a problem. What I would suggest I do is I read the response, and then I would go to the final page and give some commentary on the estimated cost range.
Yes, please do.
So the response is planning staff contacted Roy Brook, who is the executive director of the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative, to obtain information on a scope of work and estimate of fees for the town to undertake a municipal natural asset management program. Scope of work and estimated fees is attached to this correspondence for council's information as requested. So there's a number of sections which Mr. Brook has outlined, but the final number in terms of an estimate for the costs for his organization to provide us this assistance is something in the cost range of $63,000 to $79,000.
Thank you very much. Does any member of council have any questions with respect to the response to the inquiries? Okay, then that'll take us to inquiries and items of new business. Councillor McDermott, you had a question regarding the regional budget, I believe.
Yes, I did, Your Worship. Unless I read it wrong, I understood that the Pro Kids program was taken out of the budget. I'm just wondering why maybe they couldn't have found a way to keep it in the budget, maybe with a lesser amount of money. Fact of the matter is, Pro Kids is a very successful program that has gone on for years now. And I know that through my experience in youth programs, that it's been used on many occasions by people that could not ordinarily afford to get involved in these programs. So my question is, I just wonder if it's really prudent to take this program out of there. It's so important that the youth who are financially challenged get the benefit of some opportunities, whether that be baseball or some sort of sports or programs of Pro Kids with funding. I always wonder why we go for the jugular of the poor over maybe something that's important but could be put off for a few years. So I'd just like to say that I'm very disappointed that that's the case, because I think it's a program of great value to young people who really need that step up. And I think it's been proven, and I think you know it, that it has been a good program for these kids. And I would like somebody to maybe bring it back up, that we fund it at a lesser rate or do something, because opportunities like this for youth that don't have a whole lot of money are just not there. You don't.
So this was, Councillor McDermott, thank you for raising that. This was a topic of some lengthy discussion at the region, and there were people speaking on both sides with respect to this. The commissioner responsible for Community and Social Services, Adrian Jugley, spoke about this in the context of a large suite of programs that the region is trying to deliver with respect to affordability, homelessness, and some of the other programs that are available. $250,000 from the Pro Kids program and from the Niagara Poverty Initiative were recommended by staff at the region to be deferred to, I believe, 2022. This particular program, the Pro Kids, is delivered through the Niagara Y. And there had been consultation with Niagara Y with respect to this program. There are about, I believe, 2,400 children that were able to participate in this. It's a cap of $100 per child, so that the dialogue that took place was essentially that if the Niagara Y, I guess, felt that they wanted to make presentation to regional council, they could. They didn't, so under some quite, I would say, spirited questioning, Commissioner Jugley defended the decision that staff was recommending and felt that at this point, some of the other programs that they're trying to fund to address issues of low income, poverty, and that type of thing would be more beneficial as opposed to this particular program. And she advised us that the Y felt that it wasn't something that was going to interfere significantly with the programming that they deliver. So that was the context within which the decision was made to go along with staff's recommendation on this in the face of what is going to amount to a 5.8% tax increase, which, so I moved two amendments, one to take out of the budget a wayfinding program of $400,000, but that came out of capital. The other was a $750,000 item, which related to a reorganization that's going to result in a reduction in the number of employees in the audit department at the region. Regional staff were planning on taking that $750,000, which is an operating budget item, and shifting it over into capital reserves. That didn't seem to make sense, and the majority of council agreed that it should stay in the operating side, which will bring, I think, the 6% projected increase down to 5.8% or something. So unless there's some further significant reductions, that's where it's going to be, and then we'll have to deal with that when we deal with our operating budget. And I know that Mr. Jansen has been taking these into account. A couple of the bigger drivers with respect to the operating budget are the expansion of regional transit to try to bring in more people into the system. That's a large number. And then there's the expansion with respect to GO, because there's some facilities that need to be constructed. So those two alone account for about a 3% increase. Take that out, the region is fairly close to guidance, but it wasn't an easy budget. But that's essentially the explanation that I was provided. And I'll try to get some additional information for you and other members of council, just so that you've got perhaps a more clear understanding. I'm not articulating this as well as Commissioner Jugley did, but it was, I think on the vote, there were about 2/3 of councillors present who supported taking it out of this year's budget, or not taking it out, not putting it back in. There were about 1/3 that felt it should be put in. So it was, it's a difficult issue. Anything further, Councillor McDermott? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few questions, if you don't mind. First, I just want to confirm, is the request for budget for the communities in bloom for the increase from 13 to 15 already going to be reflected, or do we have to make a motion?
I presume that it will be. That's a modest sum, but I know that there's a supplemental amount. Mr. Jansen, can you comment on that?
Yes, I believe at this point, we just had all the submissions were due on Friday internally at the town. We'll be reviewing those, but I believe it's included in an existing supplementary request for 2020.
So does that then also include the request for funds for the competition as well, or?
Mr. Jansen?
I don't know if our director of planning might comment. I believe it was from his department that had compiled all those costs into one form.
Yeah, we were told it was something around $48,000 or $50,000.
Some of the items that were brought forward this evening are not ones that are within the supplemental budget. The notion of having a member, a contract member, placed within the context of the committees in bloom, as opposed to as what we had last year, where we had a student do the role, isn't something that staff is going to be recommending, but we will be recommending an approach.
So I wonder, as we go forward, if we can just make sure that when our operating budget comes forward, Mr. Jansen, we have a good handle on what parameters of the request of the Communities in Bloom Committee is. Councillor Butler.
Okay, thank you. The other questions that I've been receiving from, I've been receiving emails and phone calls actually from some of the residents, and one was an email that we all received, I think, and it was with respect to the Brock Initiative, and I just wondered, was there a reason that we didn't attend that?
Mr. Cookett, you can respond to this. You've made some response in connection with a request by Councillor Lubberts for information.
I take it you're referring to the climate change group that they've put together. So that invite went out to all municipalities. I believe 7 decided that they would be part of this group. At the time that I looked at it, we didn't have any staff available to sit on that committee. I told the group that I would want to be kept informed of the progress that they're taking, any information, any draft reports, and so on and so forth. Looking back, if it is council's wish, we could probably be myself, sit on that committee, and just walk through the process. My concern is it's going to be a long, drawn-out process, and I think we need answers sooner than later. And I think it's, the mayor's got a motion coming forward as well, how to address climate change and so forth. I don't see any results or reports coming out of this committee for at least a year. But if council's wishes for me to sit on it, I will do so, and then I could provide you with regular updates.
I think, if I might, Councillor Butler, I think if within the context of the resolution, which I hope passes this evening, relative to climate change, if Mr. Cook could at least make some further inquiries and include in the report to council what benefits or whether we will be moving forward with the Brock initiative, I think that'd be helpful. So that can be part of the report, if that's agreeable.
The only question I have left then is with respect to Councillor Ensign. I'm sad that he's not here today because I wanted to ask him a question with respect to his insight with the region and the problem that we're having with Shirley Road. So I wonder if we could make a notation of that and just send him out an inquiry and a follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, you have his email address. I'm sure that he would be, we wanted to send him an email with respect to that and copy councillors, and we'll all be on board with that. He won't necessarily be here until the next regular council meeting, which I think is January 20th. Okay, any other councillors? Any inquiries? If not, then, Madam Clerk, who's the acting mayor, or the,
That would be Councillor Zanko.
Councillor Zanko, would you mind taking over the chair? I bring my motion. So I move, seconded by Councillor Butler, that council directs staff to prepare a report and provide recommendations with respect to anticipated impacts in the near and long term of climate change, policies that the town of Fort Erie currently has in place to address those impacts, and what policies, programs, and strategies could be adopted, created, and implemented in order to meet the increasing challenges presented by climate change, the infrastructure, programs, and services for which the town of Fort Erie is responsible. And
Would you
can I
like to
just
speak to
very
that?
briefly to
Yes.
that? Yes. So this this motion really arises out of the frustration, not just of the residents who are now being visited with the impacts of climate change, but also from us, because we're here trying to represent our residents and make sure that they have the protections that they require, not only private property, but also the public property. And, this goes back probably in the early 2000s, when there were big issues relative to sewer backups in Crescent Park and flooding because of surface water in Thunder Bay. And at that time, the town looked at and began over the last few years to address the sewer overflows, number one, as did the region. And number two, there was a lot of ditching done in Thunder Bay. Unfortunately, a lot of it was directed towards the Bernard Beach, which created its own set of problems. However, it occurred to me at that time, so that's over 15 years ago, that we were going to be experiencing more frequent and greater magnitude storms, and that's held up over the last few years, and it doesn't look like there's an end in sight. For those who think that the climate is always changing, that's true. For those who don't think that humans are having any appreciable impact on the changing in climate, that's just not realistic. The reality is that we are, and the reality is that we can have some influence going forward, although one small municipality in of itself doesn't have the ability to influence climate change. However, we have to adapt to it, and we have done some things. I mean, this year in particular, we've had serious flooding at Point Abano, which we've tried to deal with, really a result of an overflow of the Point Abano drain, but really directly connected to the rise in the Lake Erie water level, which is shocking because 20 years ago, you may recall that we were all very concerned that the Great Lakes looked like they were going to dry up, and there were locations along our waterfront, Lake Erie, where I swear you could almost walk halfway to Buffalo because the water was so low. That's not the case now. You don't have any trouble getting to the water. And so when we have storms, such as the October 31st, November 1st storm, the water level in Lake Erie, because of the current natural level, but with the wind pushing water to the east end of the lake, we had water levels rising 7 feet. And even 2 weeks ago, the water level rose 5 feet. Those have significant impacts because they prevent water from getting out of the municipal drains or the many creeks that we have. So 6 Mile Creek backs up and has implications on the neighbors living in that vicinity. So we have to look at things that we can do proactively, I think, to ensure that we have adequate sized infrastructure to deal with what we know will be long-term implications of the climate change. We have to be able to find ways that we can ensure that residents aren't putting themselves in a position where they're disadvantaged because of what may occur down the road. And so that may mean, as an example, that we take a serious look at where are the floodplains? What agencies should we be working with to identify areas where people shouldn't be constructing homes or outbuildings, et cetera? And then we need to look at what programs might be available, not only for the municipality to address impacts of climate change, but what are the programs that might be available for us to work with residents and other bodies to ensure that, to the extent that we can, we accommodate and adapt to the climate change and ensure that our residents have the ability as well to make the adaptations necessary. And that means not only trying to protect what we've already got, but looking at long-term policies. Maybe we should be turning our fleet of vehicles into something other than diesel or gas-operated vehicles. I don't know that. I'm perhaps outlining a wide range of options that could result in the CAO, whom I presume will be preparing this report in conjunction with his senior staff. But this could be a very, very wide report. I'm looking at something that we can look at more likely in the near term, but with helping us to have a view of the long term. So I think it's time that we need to do this. We've all been struggling with calls from residents that we're trying to accommodate, primarily because of water. But that's unfortunately what I think is going to be the reality. The other interesting thing is it's not just water. You'll recall that last spring, ground was saturated, but by July, the ground was like concrete, so that we're getting hotter days, more frequent days strung together, and on the other hand, we're getting a shift in when the seasons actually take place. I mean, here it is. I know we've had warm days in the middle of December before, but it's December the 9th. It's 9 degrees outside and it's raining. Well, that happens. We have cycles of weather for sure, and this just may be odd, but the one thing I do know is that if we don't get that lake starting to freeze over, and right now it's still at over 40 degrees, we're going to be in a situation similar to 1977 where there was a large expanse of open water that when the temperature dropped allowed clouds to pick up moisture, and when it hit the land, bang. That's what we had in 1977. So I'm hoping that council will support this, and I'm really hoping that staff, the combined effort of staff, will be able to provide us January the 20th. I would like, I'm not looking for something expeditious. If it takes 3 months to try to put something together, I think that would be appropriate. But I think that's a reasonable time frame to at least give us some intermediate and near-term suggestions with a view to longer-term suggestions. So hopefully council will support this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Does any member of council have any questions? Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, just briefly, I want to thank the mayor for bringing up this this motion. It's something that's very important. Certainly, constituents in Ward 2, right along the lake. One gentleman I spoke with, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage to the house. It's crazy what we're starting to see happen now. And as a young individual, and I've got 2 young kids, I got a 5-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. I mean, this is something that they're going to be dealing with going into the future. And even speaking with a friend of mine at a Christmas party over the weekend who works in the insurance industry, this is going to come down to an issue of dollars and cents, because the insurance industry is seeing pressure. And he's saying, don't be surprised a couple years down the road if you see quadruples in rates, because they have to pay out for these things. So I think it's very important we be proactive, not just, certainly the future is exceptionally important for our children, but this is a dollar and cent issue, and it's very important. I because of how important this is, and to show the community, I'd like to request a recorded vote. Hopefully we all vote in favor of it, but certainly I want to thank the mayor for bringing this forward. It's very important.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this as well. We're a community surrounded by water, and I'm looking forward to seeing something in the report that's going to address, how we're going to be able to help residents mitigate damages, especially knowing that I've had a few residents in the 6 Mile Creek area that have experienced overwhelming flooding, specifically on Shirley Road, where the flood height was so high that it actually was up to the steering column of their vehicle, and they lost 2 vehicles, not to mention the damage that they had in their homes. So I'm looking forward to this, and I just wonder if that report, Madam Chair, perhaps the mayor can speak to it, would encompass the possibility of hiring an expert as a member of staff.
What I have in mind is getting some advice from the CAO and senior staff once they've had a chance to direct their attention to this. And it may be that in the long term, in order to deal with policies and programs or infrastructure issues, that there may be a need for someone. But I'll leave that to the CAO to figure out and make recommendations to us. And when we get the report, we can always ask questions or make amendments if necessary.
Any other questions? I'm going to refer to the clerk now.
Recorded vote, Councillor McDermott,
In favor?
Councillor Butler,
Yes?
Councillor Zanko,
Yes.
Councillor Dubanow,
Yes.
Mayor Redekop.
Yes.
The vote carries unanimously.
Thank you, and I will pass the chair back to you.
And thank you very much to members of council. There are no other motions. That takes us to notices of motion, and Councillor Dubanow. No, you go ahead. You might anticipate what I've got in mind.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to bring a notice of motion for staff to prepare a report on public education campaign on the official plan, secondary plan, zoning bylaws, and how this could potentially affect land use in Fort Erie. And that would be returnable January 20th.
Yep. Thank you. So, Mr. Brady, we heard, I guess I should have raised this under inquiries, but we've heard from the Communities in Bloom delegation today that they're looking for a change in their mandate. And I presume that that would require some type of dialogue between the Communities in Bloom Committee and the planning staff with respect to the changes which have been suggested, and then maybe some recommendation from the staff.
Yes, Your Worship, there has been dialogue, and I don't believe that planning staff agrees with the change of mandate that's been suggested. And as I mentioned earlier, there's also the idea that they would have their own staff member that would report to them. And last year, we provided a co-op student throughout the summer to provide them with assistance, and we thought that that worked out quite well. Obviously, the Communities in Bloom want to have more control of the situation, and as I said, we'll be bringing what staff thinks is a reasonable approach to this, but I don't think we're on the same page at the present time.
Okay, well, I think it might be helpful for me to get clear indication of the changes to the mandate, and then I'll circulate that to members of council, and then we can see, who is our council representative? Councillor Butler. So you, okay, so maybe you already have that information. So perhaps you and I can chat about this and see where we go. Yeah, I don't think I want to bring a notice of motion until I've got a better understanding of what the changes are, because it seems to me that if we've got an organization or a committee that's thinking that it can do more or needs to shift emphasis, maybe we need to look at that. So I'll follow that up with you, Councillor Butler, if I may. Okay. If there are no other notices of motion, that takes us to reports. And the first report relates to the Niagara 2021 Canada Summer Games. Councillor Dubanow, you have the resolution, but before I get you there, Madam Chair, you've pointed out quite correctly that we have one person that is being asked to be designated to the position. Do we want to deal with that first, or do we want to deal with part one of this resolution? Recommendation.
I think that if there's a chance that the first recommendation may not be approved, that maybe we should be dealing with them separately.
So let's deal with the first recommendation first, Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Zanko, that the town of Fort Erie participate in the 13 for 13 cultural program by entering into a memorandum of understanding with the Niagara 2021 Canada Summer Games.
Are there any questions or comments on that? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. So, Madam Clerk, that gets us then to the need for an appointment of a councillor. You've indicated that if there's more than one councillor that wishes to be appointed, that we should have a vote. And I think
That's
there are,
correct.
I think there are at least two that are interested, just from the emails that I saw. Okay, so I know that Councillor McDermott is interested. If there's no one other than Councillor McDermott, then we will all take one step back, and you will be the appointee. Is there anyone other than Councillor McDermott that would like to be appointed? Then let's, with your approval, Councillor McDermott, we're going to insert your name into this blank slot. And Councillor Dubanow, I would ask you to proceed then to read the second recommendation, including Councillor McDermott's name.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Zanko, that council appoints Councillor McDermott to the town's 13 for 13 cultural program working group.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Congratulations, Councillor McDermott. Okay, that takes us then to the next report, which is the extension of the agreement between the corporation and Jeffrey Klein in connection with a severance and some buildings. Councillor Butler, you have that resolution.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott, that PDS 74-2019 extension of agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Fort Erie and Jeffrey Klein, 0 Dominion Road, that council agrees to extend the agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Fort Erie and Jeffrey Klein to May 27th, 2022, and that the owner be so advised.
Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. And that takes us then to the final report, which relates to the tender for work at Erie Beach and the Burley Road subdivision regarding services to have been done by the developers. Councillor McDermott, you have the resolution for that.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that PDS 75-2019, the award of tender for Erie Beach and Burley Road subdivision, the miscellaneous roadworks, contract number PDS 19 TEBBR 19, that council accepts and approves the tender submission for the Erie Beach and Burley Road subdivision, miscellaneous roadworks, contract number PDS 19 TEBBR 19 from Brennan Paving Limited in the amount of $465,136.25, including GST or HST.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor of the resolution? None opposed, that is carried. And Mr. Walsh, you'll be in charge of marshaling that work, or your department is responsible for that? Planning department?
The planning department will be administering this. The Jeremy Corvar and Spencer will be looking after it.
So will we be notifying the residents, because I know that some of the councillors have been receiving inquiries from members of council with respect to when this work will be done? Can we send something out to the residents?
We certainly can. So you'd like us to put a flyer in their mailbox
would be
on
helpful.
the streets that are
Yeah.
being dealt with?
I think it would be helpful, particularly they'll know that at least the work has now been approved by council, and we've got a contractor ready to go when the weather permits next year. Oh, there's one more report. Councillor Zanko, you have the report with respect to sanitary sewer inspections.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, Councillor Dubanow, that IS 46-2019, award of contract number ISE-19P-SANCTV, sanitary sewer closed circuit television inspection and assessment, that council accepts and approves the proposal from 284612 Ontario Limited, operating as Bob Robinson and Son Construction, to complete sanitary sewer closed circuit television inspection and assessment, contract number ISE-19P-SANCTV, at an upset limit of $163,214.94, including HST, and further, that council accepts and approves the proposal from 284612 Ontario Limited, operating as Bob Robinson and Son Construction, to complete the scope extension work of contract number ISE-19P-SANCTV for sanitary sewer closed-circuit television inspection and assessment at an upset limit of $53,309.45, including HST.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments by members of council? I would just point out that that second paragraph really relates to additional work that's being possible because of the nature of the low quote from the contractor. So we're able to actually stretch the dollars allocated to this project. If there are no questions or comments, all those in favor of the recommendations? None opposed, that is carried. That then gets us to consideration of bylaws. Is there any bylaw that anyone wishes removed from the package? Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to remove 154-2019.
Okay. And Councillor Dubanow, you have the resolution for first and second reading of the council package. Are there any other items that anyone wishes removed? If not, then please proceed with the package as amended.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that the bylaw package containing 155-2019 to declare lands as public highway on the terminus of Commerce Parkway, 156-2019 to adopt the preliminary capital budget for the town of Fort Erie for the year 2020, and 157-2019 to adopt the 2019 to 2023 multi-year accessibility plan for the town of Fort Erie, and to repeal bylaw number 40-13 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? Unopposed, that is carried. That bylaw package as amended is on the floor for questions or comments. There are none. Then, Councillor Butler, you have the resolution for third and final reading, so it's the bylaws minus 154.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that bylaws 155-2019, 156-2019, 157-2019 are given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Dubanow, if you would go back to first and second reading of 154.
Yep, I'd be happy to, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that the bylaw 157-2019 to adopt a whistleblower policy for the corporation of town of Fort Erie is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That bylaw is on the floor. Councillor Dubanow, you want to speak to it?
I do, Your Worship, and you anticipated that, so I appreciate that. I just want to extend my appreciation to all of the staff, particularly Ms. Morden, who was involved in drafting this. I think this is a very important issue, especially with what we have going on at the region right now and the Ombudsman report. I don't know if a whistleblower policy at the region would have resolved this, but it certainly might have given us an idea earlier on that something was up if we were seeing reports and they weren't being dealt with properly, or they were, who knows? But that's a big part of the reason why I originally gave the notice of motion, was looking at that, what happened at the Conservation Authority, and I think it's always prudent to act proactively rather than reactively. And as the mayor had mentioned earlier tonight, with regard to what we've done during 2019, the municipality is in good financial shape. We've had a lot of success over the last year. Policies like this allow us to continue that success and to give residents the confidence knowing that, moving forward, we have some safeguards in place. So I'm thrilled to see this on the floor tonight. I see the mayor nodding his head. I'm sure he appreciates that. Again, like earlier tonight, it's an important issue. I'm going to ask for a recorded vote, and I hope council will support this. Thank you, Worship.
You're more than welcome. Any other questions or comments before we go to third and final reading? Then Councillor Butler, third and final reading, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that bylaw 154-2019 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any further questions or comments? I would point out, Councillor Dubanow, that I have brought forward a notice of motion that's returnable at the region to adopt a similar type policy, and that's going to be returnable this Thursday. So thank you for leading the way on that. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Sorry. All those in favor, Madam Clerk, take it over.
Councillor McDermott,
In favor?
Councillor Butler,
Yes.
Councillor Zanko,
Yes, I'm in favor.
Councillor Dubanow,
Yes, absolutely.
Mayor Redekop.
Yes.
The vote carries unanimously.
Thank you. That takes us then to Councillor McDermott for the first and second reading of the confirmatory bylaw.
Thank you, Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that bylaw number 158-2019 to confirm the actions of council at its council and committee meetings held on December 2nd, 2019, council and budget committee meeting held on December 4th, 2019, and council meeting held on December 9th, 2019 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Zanko, you had third and final reading.
Yes, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubanow. I don't know why I have Councillor McDermott in my mind this evening.
One has a beard and one doesn't.
That bylaw number 158-2019 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to scheduling of meetings, Councillor Zanko and then Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, thank you. We have an EDTC board meeting being held tomorrow at 5 p.m. at the EDTC location.
Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have a Transit Advisory Committee meeting this Wednesday at 3 p.m. at Town Hall. And we also have a library board, Fort Erie Public Library Board meeting next week on Tuesday the 17th at 4:30. That's a special time. We're starting up a little early that evening because we're having a Christmas party later in the evening. So just make note of that.
Cool. Any other meetings that anyone wishes to announce? Okay, that gets us right to where we should be. Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that council adjourns at 7:19 p.m. to reconvene into a regular meeting of council on January 20th, 2020.
All those in favor? That is unanimous, I think. Thank you.